These are the end times. There is no hope of survival. This is how you died in a mediocre amount of time. Greetings, travelers, and happy second spookiest season of the year, because it's not quite the American tax season yet. Today we will be learning how to Project Zomboid, a game that was developed in a series of absolutely horrific circumstances and poor decision making, culminating in a beautiful PowerPoint presentation aptly named How Not to Make a Video Game. The goal of the project then shifted to making players experience merely 1% of the suffering inflicted upon its creators. The result is scientifically recreating exactly what it is like living in rural Kentucky. The learning curve is steep, ruthless, and makes me feel unintelligent and unproductive. So, nothing out of the ordinary. Disclaimer, the game is constantly updated and will never leave the official early access stage of development, so information is subject to change, and I am known for occasionally being a tiny bit completely wrong, but never admitting to it because I'm always right. Now, I have a soft spot in my heart for small indie game development teams and the absolute horrors of realizing that you are in way over your head, and it's why I would still set aside some of my Necopara funds to support this game no matter what. Thankfully for all of us, the game is also quite good. Easily the second best zombie survival game right behind Left 4 Dead, and just ahead of that one level in Simpsons Hit and Run. Project Zomboid is a survival, crafting, sandbox, open world space exploration, immersive sim roguelike house builder that has a mascot based on an in-game restaurant chain called Spiffos. Everyone loves that stupid raccoon. Upon launching a solo run, you will be asked what difficulty you would like to play on. It is considered canon to play on the Ninja Gaiden difficulty setting, which has the secondary benefit of being prepared for the future if the GME stock conspiracy theory becomes true, because the entire world will be ruled by self-proclaimed apes in the streets. Difficulties are highly customizable, but as I always say, there is an experience intended by the developers, and then there is what is actually in the game, and I always want to experience the game as is without any sort of outside influence whatsoever. We are then prompted to choose our starting farm, which are listed purely in alphabetical order, so do not expect the default selection to be the easiest. In fact, Mold Draw tends to be challenging for beginners for two big reasons. It has limited resources and a fuckload of zombies. Does that make it a useless starting location? No. I would say if you want to jump into the deep end and start learning how to stealth, evasive maneuvers, and the inevitable combat you are forced to do, it can help you adjust quickly after sacrificing a small hamlet's worth of starting characters. We've all heard of the classic 1200 hours before it gets good, but this is more like 1200 turn the game offs and take a walk before you accept finality. Before it gets good. Experienced players will probably note that Mold Draw has a high density of motor vehicles, making it solid for starting up a tofu delivery service slightly faster than any other starting farm's drift any percent categories. Then you will remember that I said for beginners, which is an important qualifier for my statement to be slightly more truthful and have a layer of plausible deniability. It should go without saying that every starting city is valid, and I cannot say which one you will personally find to be the smoothest because I cannot predict the future. All I can do is provide a statistical likelihood that you probably will not enjoy testicular torsion. Zombie density scales with population density, so cities and areas where people would like to congregate, such as pre-pandemic shopping malls, have significantly more shoppers. The wilderness tends to have a bit less zombies and no wildlife because it has not yet been implemented. Of the starting decks, Riverside has the least amount of clickers, which is why the starting city that I recommend is Rosewood. We are then asked if we want to play as a Zomboy or a Zomgirl. I personally play as Dead Man Walking. Upon starting an actual playthrough, you will be in a location. The goal is to acquire a container for water as quickly as possible. The ideal water containment device is a bottle, but a mug will suffice until something better comes around. A soda bottle can be filled with water after consuming its contents. I know, it's amazing how far technology has advanced. Water drinking is completely automated as long as there is some in the player's inventory. Staying crouched and closing curtains will help prevent zomboids from spotting you and banging on the windows and banging on the doors to attract even more friends. Turning down or turning off the TVs and radios can also prevent noise-based break-ins. Attempting to stuff any first aid and curtains into your pockets to create lodgings later are solid ideas. It might also be a good idea to try and locate a big pot for cooking, a can opener to make a bunch of other food valid, and grabbing something to immediately snack on are pretty standard. Just remember that any injury inflicted by a zombie comes with a small chance of guaranteed death. However, breaking a window and forgetting to remove the broken glass and then needing to bandage up afterwards is a very common problem for newcomers. Other injuries are only a death sentence if you are unprepared. Ripping up spare clothing acts as a cheap and dirty way to stop bleeding because bandages are somewhat rare if you do not know where to look. When encountering Redditors, it might be useful to change settings to show the outline of all enemies when they are in range with all attacks. Is this cheating? Excellent question. Some people believe playing the game with sound on is cheating. I'm sorry that my ultra kill combos are not perfected and my Final Fantasy XIV parses are not in the top 1%. I am only mediocre. The outline setting is not enabled by default, but it has saved my life so many times by now that I will just accept that it is like pressing the grovel button in God Hand. I will beg for mercy when I feel the heat. One Zomboni is easy to manage, but where the game gets you is when you are completely overwhelmed. Keeping track of where you have space to attack while guiding the conga line backwards is most important, and then you will still get jump scared by some fucker that you didn't see in a corner. Shoving is the default unarmed attack and is primarily used to keep distance and with luck knock enemies down on the ground. Attempting to locate the isometric position of the head will then cause shove to turn into stomp and do something that I cannot say on YouTube. Hitting a zombie that is downed will reset their wake up timer, and you can knock them down again if they are not too far into the get up animation for a nasty okie. With some reasonably lucky knockdowns, it is possible to keep up with 2 or even more Zeds and stun lock them into a deadly true combo. If you see a large pack in the distance that must be dealt with, it is ideal to try and pull a few of them at a time to keep it manageable, usually by staying far away and only walking slightly into vision range, or by crouching and pressing the Q button to whisper very quietly. This type of combat is called the Schwamp and Stomp, which I just made up right on the spot right now because I've never heard anybody in the Zomboid community call it that, and this is all part of one giant beginner's trap. The golden rule of Project Zomboid is that you are very tired. Characters by default will become exhausted after fighting Black Friday shoppers consistently. Energy can then be acquired by sitting on the ground, and then the next time the character gets back up, they will become exhausted even faster. This is known as the exhaustion feedback loop. Conserving energy and considering every single action as an in-game transaction is the correct mindset for maximizing business profits in this capitalist hellscape. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It's also very good for survivability. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't take fights. It means that you should try to take fights that are most likely to secure value and diversify your portfolio, such as clearing out an area to make a safe space or making looting less risky. Under non-augmented settings, the default walking speed is faster than any undead. Thus, when being chased by zombies, power walking like an Omicron male is all that it takes to keep distance while creating a line of fans behind you. Zombies, like the average gamer, are dumb but incredibly persistent. They will follow you to the ends of the world, but once you are out of line of sight, object permanence will begin to malfunction. They will go to your last known position and try to see you again. If they do not, they give up. This sight recheck has a much larger range than the initial aggro sight check, and this is why cornering around buildings and then ducking around a second corner can help lose most of an entire pack of bullshit. Ideally putting as many barriers for continued line of sight disruption to help break up the horde, especially when one has such a cute bag that I want. Energy efficiency is directly tied to your character's cardio, which is why athletic is considered to be one of the best perks in the game. Shoving is pretty garbage though. Having a weapon is slightly more optimal. Weapons that are not considered real weapons, such as this frying pan, will degrade significantly faster than stuff that is more like an actual weapon, such as an axe or a baseball bat. Which is complete bullshit because my solid cast iron frying pan could take out at least 1,000 zombies, probably more. We take what we get though at first and hopefully acquire better tools later. Shoving is still possible even with a weapon equipped by pressing the spacebar, which is useful for other reasons but is especially especially helpful for preserving weapon durability. Day 1 is going to be spent on finding a place to camp out. Many houses are good to use short term as long as the windows are covered to prevent peeping toms. It's a good thing I stole all those curtains from the starting dungeon. However, since I started in Rosewood, the fire station is the only true typical option for bases. How is it possible to know where this is? The map in Project Zomboid is not procedurally generated. It is fixed, but everything else like loot and enemy locations are completely randomized. The Project Zomboid interactive map is used by many people to get their bearings, but familiarity will also come with time. See how I invest my energy into securing a break-in and creating a safe room. Being the lumberjack that I am means that I want to find at least one axe, but hopefully more, and equip it in both hands to increase the strength modifier by 1.5. That was a joke. But two-handing does decrease the encumbrance of the item, just like how putting stuff in my duffel bag reduces the encumbrance as well. Axes are also a two-handed weapon, so it will also work properly. The chairman needs to watch his VTubers. Watching Twitch.tv helps us acquire knowledge. As billionaire Wuffet Born said, the more you learn, the should have been born to rich parents. Unfortunately, born wealthy is not a starting trait. Knowledge is acquired by reading books and watching HGTV at 6, 12, and 18 for the first week in game. There's a reason why having a watch to tell time is very useful. Both reading and watching TV can be done at the same time. It's called multitasking, and it doesn't hinder my ability to do either task. This will acquire survival skills such as fishing, foraging, and carpeting. This is going to help as mid-game progresses because water and electricity will eventually shut off, and carpentry can be used to build barrels to collect rainwater, and foraging and fishing will help get food and medicine. Of course, not everyone is going to level carpentry to collect rainwater, which is why drinking pond water will make you nauseous and even make you sick if you chug enough of it, unless you have lemongrass from foraging. I don't believe this will outright kill you though if you're desperate for water, but if you take that stagnant water and put it above a sink and hook it up with a pipe wrench, it's going to be safe to consume. Don't think about it. Traditionally, stagnant water can be made safe to consume by boiling it, and using ripped clothes and bandages with boiling water is how you get sterile bandages. Skills are gained by performing repetitive menial tasks, but the real winners are watching edutainment VHS tapes and reading books, especially the books, because they give you an experience point multiplier which is borderline mandatory to reach the upper levels. Not all skills are created equal though, because first aid is borderline useless. At least it's easy to power level by standing on broken glass and repeatedly removing it from your feet. Most days early on are going to consist of venturing out a small distance to acquire resources and making sure not to aggro way too many things at once. Holding E to get over small fences is a good habit to have, as it reduces the chances of tripping and can even leave walkers in the dust if you're jumping over larger ones. That is very energy intensive though. Food is always something you're going to be looking for, but if you get lucky, you can maybe make note of a generator in a garage somewhere, or find some Volume 1 books, or find a box of nails. It's fairly self-explanatory, but generators can create power once the grid goes down, and nails are required to barricade broken windows so that zombies do not have valid positions to randomly wander into your base while sleeping. A small amount of zombies do respawn every 3 in-game days by default, but will not respawn inside of an area that you have recently been in. No, the overwhelming majority of those zombies just wandered in from somewhere else. There is a deep philosophical debate about zombie respawn within the community, to which I'll just defer to whatever the team puts the difficulty settings to by default so that it's not my problem. Planks can be acquired by disassembling furniture with a hammer and a saw, as well as potentially getting nails depending on luck. Alternatively, sawing logs that you chop down and tied together with sheet rope for easier moving can get a lot of planks very quickly for base building. These are all the basics to setting up operations for at least the first week, and struggling to get resources for the mid-game. Finding a shovel or a trowel will be useful for potential farming later, but seeds are going to be an absolute bitch to get, so it's not a huge immediate priority. Hunkering down and reading books and watching TV to acquire survival stats is a solid early game Zomboid strat, especially if you started with the underweight trait. Speaking of which, there are many jobs and traits to choose from when building a character that require a minimum of 17 YouTube tier lists to fully understand all of the trade-offs and the journey of mediocrity. Here are some cliff notes. Strong stomach does not prevent you from dying of dysentery. It just reduces the chances. What could possibly go wrong? Only immediately ending your run. It might be a bad trait, but if you simply never eat rotten food, weak stomach is free points. Conspicuous sounds awful in a game where stealth is your only true friend, but visual-based stealth in Project Zomboid is incredibly fair, because you perform a stealth check on every frame that a zombie has you in its line of sight, and the odds of you not being seen after plugging this into a P function on my TI-89 graphing calculator are not good. The difference between nearly zero and nearly zero is basically zero. So you might as well get the 4 free points, and remember that staying quiet is the only real stealth option. So fuck clumsy. All my fellow travelers hate clumsy. Prone to illness makes you turn into a zombie faster if you get infected. But fun fact, there is only one thing you can do when you get the zombie infection. Go out in Blades of Glory and take as many of those fuckers down with you. You can still get a Japanese cold variant that will put you flat on your ass for a week, and no waifus will visit you because you are alone. But when you pair this with Outdoorsman, you can mostly negate the negative effects and still come out ahead on points. You can even take the Great Outdoorsman with thin-skinned and be mostly unlikely to cut yourself on a thorny bush and take significantly more damage from zombies. Simply don't get hit. You can counter slow reading by fast forwarding in single player, and you can counter short-sighted by wearing glasses that will fall off your face immediately because all glasses do not fit properly at all. Finally, we have everyone's favorite, the weight traits. Overweight will let you starve for 7 more days, but once you lose the weight, you will lose the debuff. However, you cannot take the athletic trait, which as stated earlier, is arguably one of the best in the game. Underweight, on the other hand, can be paired with athletic for some reason, and will allow you to fulfill your bulking fantasy of funneling raw oil and butter substitutes down your gullet to put on enough weight to lose the debuff. These actions will make your character very unhappy and very bored, but we are here to survive, not thrive. Hunger will decrease based on how much hunger is restored by food. Who could have seen that coming? But weight gain and losses are determined by calorie intake, and those two things are not directly correlated. Raw calories are much more important long-term to prevent starvation, but hunger is more immediately important, as a hungry dead man walk-in loses strength, giving less carry weight and weaker hits. Cabbage restores the most hunger, but potatoes give the most calories, and both of those pale in comparison to the raw calories of fishing, because those fish have grown to massive sizes from feeding off of industrial runoff. That covers some of the interesting and useful traits without digressing whatsoever, but there are also jobs in this game of which Dragoon has not yet been implemented. For beginners, Veteran comes with the unique Desensitized trait, causing you to not cry when something kind of sad happens in a piece of fiction, because you will normally panic upon seeing zombies at first, not just literally, but as an in-game mechanic. This causes trembling, which affects aiming guns, turning you into an enemy AI that's shooting behind you in an FPS game. Not sorry for ruining your immersion. Guns do have a subtle mechanic of being loud as fuck and aggroing every single zombie in existence. Couple this without being able to aim, and this is what we like to call a suboptimal situation without a shotgun. Veteran can negate half of that because you'll still aggravate the entire neighborhood, but you can at least more effectively exercise your God-given Second Amendment rights and acquire tinnitus, which is not an in-game mechanic. It's a popular archetype to burn through finite munitions and probably die. Just note that all characters panic less the more months that roll by in the blink of an eye, meaning Veteran technically gets worse the longer your average runs go, whereas Police Officer unrealistically offers more raw skills. Lumberjack can swing axe good. Literally, your character will get a unique, faster axe swinging animation, making the axe attacks extra crispy, especially when landing that juicy sweet spot. There are other unique bonuses to jobs, such as being able to hotwire cars as a burglar, which is very cool and interesting, but I always take the Axeman, and the smoking addiction debuff. This causes anxiety to build up without getting a fix, and unfortunately, there is no cure for addiction. I just really like having to find ciggies and a way to light them constantly, because taking a smoke break after slaughtering another pack that chased after the helicopter seems appropriate to my RP fantasy, and it's very likely to die of other causes before the emphysema kicks in anyway. Speaking of corpse parties, dead bodies eventually rot, and walking by them will cause instant death illness. A giant pile of corpses has a very similar effect. It is probably best to move corpses out of the way, especially if they are in whatever base setup is going on. A proper burial can help remove the rot, but it's a little time and energy consuming. Thankfully, driving over corpses does not hurt the car, other than ruining handling and careening off the road into a not great situation. But hey, driving over the corpses didn't cause any of that damage. Driving into actual zombies will damage the vehicle that you are driving and make life difficult without leveling up the mechanic skills and acquiring parts to make repairs. Cars are also loud as fuck, so make sure to park away from a giant horde for best results, and siphoning gas out of wrecked vehicles puts them to good use, especially if you use that fuel for a generator that you know how to hook up because you read a magazine for it. Hauling generators by hand is also borderline impossible, so securing a car to haul them around alone is valid. Just try not to get cheesed by the driver door being technically open but not appearing to according to the in-game visuals. You gotta be a little patient before you step on that gas. Unlike corpses, bloodstains can only be cleaned with bleach, although there is no negative consequence for walking by a bunch of bloodstains. It just makes it really hard to nail my interior design. Thank God we have the ability to shower in the sink but not shower in the shower because it hasn't yet been implemented. When putting all this together, it's gonna look a little something like this. Congratulations if you made it this far. You now have all the knowledge to die within the first 10 seconds of the game. Although, if you go back to the world where your character died, you can find them, and kill them again, and get your stuff back and none of the skills. Awesome. There are plenty of other top 10 beginners tricks that will make you aroused to find on the internet, but this is just a simple, mediocre guide. Above all else, being afraid of death is the worst trait in the beginning, but there is a fine line between bravery and stupidity. To be the best Zomboid is to thread that line perfectly. It is on the misshapen chair list of recommended experiences that you will try once and somehow come back to because it lives rent-free in your head for many months afterwards. Why the hell did that zombie attack me mid-wake up? For that reason, I'm gonna have to give the game a horrifically pitiful score of 9.6 out of 10. Only because the katana is the best weapon in the game. Now let's get out there and survive a 2-story jump out of a window in a panic. Do you enjoy my mediocre videos? Do you want to waste money every month on very minimal early access to my content? Maybe, but I know somebody who will be happy. As always, a big thank you to all my patrons for their support.